Yeah, here in Ireland, you can't make someone homeless here in Ireland. So if you have a renter and they cannot find another place to rent, they can say, I'm not leaving. And so I've had friends have that. A friend had someone who said he wasn't leaving. And it's, there's not a lot of rules here in Ireland for the renter. I mean, the person who owns the rental unit.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.
Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 409. I'm talking with Susan Baughman. We're going to talk about Airbnb and some of the myths that have been circulating about Airbnb, about how it's going out of business or whatever. Susan is a host who lives in beautiful Southern Ireland. I highly encourage you to go visit Southern Ireland if you have the chance. And so we're going to talk about that, although she's also from the U.S. She's an American and Irish. So how are you, Susan?
I'm doing great. I was in Austin, Texas for the heat.
Yes. So anyway, how long have you been an Airbnb host?
Well, here in Ireland, I've been an Airbnb host for probably about 10 or 12 years, but I actually was a host in Austin before I left. So I didn't do it as much.
And you're one single room in
Correct.
Your house?
Yeah. The way I have it set up now is I have one room listed, but I have a second room that's not listed. I happen to live on a very popular walking trail. So sometimes when I have two people book the room, they're not a couple. So when they come, I offer them the other bedroom across the hall so that they don't have to just sleep together or whatever if they're not a couple. And so I keep that one. So I do let them use the second room if they want to.
Oh, wow. So a lot of people, you hear things, Airbnb is going out of business. What are some of the facts and what are some of the myths that aren't true?
Well, I will say this. I do a lot of traveling as well in the States, as well as in other places in Europe and the UK. And there are definitely some issues with Airbnb and the issues, not that they're going out of business, but the issues are I can rent my room 4 nights and get what some people are getting for the whole month here in my village to rent a room, to say like a summer worker. And so people are doing Airbnb because they can make a lot more money, or they can rent it for 2 weeks and then their friend can come down for 2 weeks. So you don't have the commitment of having a renter for 3 months during the summer tourist season or whatever. And so because of that, there's a lot of places that there's a real shortage of staff housing. One of our local golf courses here actually bought a guest house so that they could have employee housing. And I'm finding that, you go to England, you go to these beautiful little coastal towns and everything's Airbnb. You go to Italy, everything's Airbnb. So there's no place for, bartenders, people that work in the hotel. There's no place for them to live. So a lot of countries have installed a ban on Airbnb. Not just Airbnb, short-term rental, STRs, they're called. And short-term rentals are being banned because there's such a housing shortage. Ireland's doing that as well, but it seems to be mostly Airbnb in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody looking for a rental there.
Okay, so Airbnb is...
They are definitely, I've gone to many a town. Yeah, many a town has banned Airbnb style renting. But it's still, I think it'll work. One thing, there are a lot of complaints because I'm on a couple of little groups, like Facebook groups and stuff, of people who are in different counties that do Airbnb. There's a lot of complaints how much money Airbnb gets now. Because the bigger they get, this seems that they take more money. Instead of the bigger they get, they should take a smaller percentage because they're making so much money. But, So when somebody pays, let's say they pay 100 euros for a room, the host maybe gets 65. That's a lot of money that Airbnb is getting. I mean, I don't know if that's the exact number, so don't hold me to that, but there's a big chunk of it goes to Airbnb. And I think a lot of people aren't happy with that are hosts.
So what you're saying is that Airbnb is taking places to live outside of the normal rental market. And I know people
Correct.
are doing that.
So they're taking
putting
like a
apartments on
place, maybe
Airbnb.
like a waitress might stay here, work at the golf course. Yeah, that kind of thing. They're taking that housing. And sometimes, I mean, some of the places like Dublin, there's tourism in Dublin 12 months a year. So if somebody takes a room that a waitress or somebody could work in, that's 12 months a year that they're getting Airbnb. And then, but the thing is, they can always just block it off at Christmas time, have their family come visit. They can block it off when they want to go on vacation. So there's all these benefits of having short-term rentals that you don't get. I mean, I had a renter here for about 5 months, and they damaged the room. And so I just said, I'll never do that again. Never have renters again, because they damaged the room. They pulled the curtains closed and pulled the curtain rod right off the wall and didn't tell me. So until they left, I didn't even know they'd done it. And it's like, come on, I'm never going to use a long-term rental in my house.
So you're having less hassles with your Airbnb guests than with tenants.
Yeah. Because even if I get somebody that's like a horrible guest, which I've never had an absolutely horrible guest, but if I had an absolutely horrible guest, they're here for 3 days. That's easy to get. But if you have a renter that turns out to be bad, man, they're there for a year. Forget that.
And I know from experience, if you have a sociopath who wants to stay, I mean, this was a case where the sociopath ended up being taken to court on it. A lack of payment of rent.
Here in Ireland, you can't make someone homeless here in Ireland. So if you have a renter and they cannot find another place to rent, they can say, I'm not leaving. And so I've had friends have that. A friend had someone who said he wasn't leaving. And it's, there's not a lot of rules here in Ireland for the rentor. I mean, the person who owns the rental unit. The person who has the power is the renter. And so, who wants that?
Yeah, the property owner. Yeah, I figured it was worse in Europe. I knew New Hampshire just basically, they basically made it at-will evictions. So, and sometimes it's not necessarily payment of rent. You could have a tenant who's making violent threats against other tenants. You might have a tenant who's actually driving other tenants away, or, property damage, stuff like that. Yeah. So maybe it's just because renters are behaving so badly that why everybody's going to Airbnb.
Yeah, like I had the renter I had, he, just a simple thing. Wasn't expensive, but I have matching water glasses that are in the Airbnb room. He broke one, and he went out and he replaced it with a completely different glass that doesn't match. And it was just a cheap little glass that probably cost $1. And he said, oh, I replaced the one I broke. And I said, well, that doesn't matter. I want matching glasses. The way my room is, everything's very, meticulous. I want 2 glasses that match. I don't want one that looks like it costs €1 and the other one costs $7, And so things like that, just a renter did. And I was like, oh, I'll never do a renter again.
Well, yeah. Well, at least he didn't just do nothing about it, but yeah. So, what are some of if somebody wants to be an Airbnb host, what should they consider before jumping into this?
Well, I'll tell you, as someone who has backgrounds in finance, one thing that's worth looking into is, what you expect you might make, and will that bump you into a different tax bracket? Because, let's say you have a job in Austin and you're thinking about doing Airbnb, you have a job and you're in, like, let's say 26% tax bracket or whatever. What if you end up making money and you're bumped into the 32% tax bracket? Will what you're making, because of your higher tax rate, be worth it? So that's one thing to look at right away. Another thing is the commitment to being at your place. It depends. Some people just rent a house, they have a lockbox, they literally never see the guest. That's not how mine is. So, sometimes I've got an invitation that says, hey, you want to go to Waterford, which is a cool little town. You want to go to Waterford for the weekend? Well, I can't because I've already booked Airbnb. So there's, you have to really think about that. And what I recommend is go into Airbnb as if you're visiting your town and put, things that, let's say you live near Barton Springs Pool. Put in there, Airbnb, Barton Springs Pool, and see what comes up. See what kind of price range they are. See how fancy they are. See if they have limits. See if they have unlimits. Just kind of see what's out there. Because, like, for instance, I was looking at Croatia recently, Dubrovnik, and I'm thinking about going to Dubrovnik probably, like May or June or something like that. And, Dubrovnik, the hotels are very expensive. It's a very touristy area. It's very popular. Well, when I went on Airbnb, now I was looking for a single room. So some places might not, offer that, but they were cheap. Really cheap. And I just thought, wow, that's, but they're not fancy. But they're clean. It's like bed, table, chair, bathroom. What more do you need?
Yes. Susan,
So,
I've actually,
but then I stayed in a castle that was an Airbnb.
stayed in a castle, yeah. Because, they have houses on Airbnb. They have apartments on Airbnb. I think some of these people, even have Airbnb managers. So, I knew another lady who, she has an Airbnb, but she only allows it for a month lease. So you got to rent for the whole month. But she gets, like a traveling nurse or somebody like that. Yeah, that is
That's
interesting.
a great way to do it.
I also find, Susan, that Airbnb hosts are, the Airbnb hosts like you who really like people, they are much better than a hotel. You want your guests to have a good time. You'll help them out. I had one Airbnb host in Munich who immediately showed me how to use the bus app. So so I could get around on buses in Munich. And I had another offer me an umbrella. I had the one in Yerevan, Armenia, set me up with a driver. And it was just, they were actually more helpful. And then not to mention also, you can occasionally get access.
I had a husband and wife from Chicago just the other day. 2 days ago, I had a husband and wife from Chicago. And when I opened the door, they said, "We already love you." And I said, "You've never even met me." And they said, "But you've already given us more information on Airbnb about like where to come on the way, where to eat dinner before they were coming late." She said, "We love you already because you've already given us so much information and so much help." And so that's what you get with Airbnb. The people that are into hosting. Some people just have like a lockbox. That's not me.
Well, yeah. I think some people, have the lockbox just in case they're not there at the time. I do wish more Airbnb hosts also would have number locks. There are a lot of them with number locks in America. I don't see very many of them outside of America with number locks. And yeah,
it's interesting. I had one near Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. And I even went back and looked at it the next day and said, "Am I missing something? How did I end up here?" And I thought it was someone's house. They indicated it was their house. They indicated it was their home. And when I got there, there was 5 bedrooms and each bedroom had a lockbox on the bedroom door. And it was 5 people that were all staying on Airbnb. None of us knew each other. The host was never there. Nobody to ask a question. Nobody, where's the nearest, not like where's the nearest CVS? You can look that up online, but it was just kind of like, oh, I'm thinking about getting a taxi. Do you recommend like a certain place for a meal? Nobody was there. I couldn't believe it. I would never want to stay in a place like that again. Because
It
I've
really
made
depends.
Airbnb friends. I mean, I've stayed in places. I'm friends with these people now.
Yeah, I kind of feel like these people are friends too. I have, you know, and I have an Airbnb that I like in Houston. I haven't really found quite an Airbnb like that in the DFW area where you find a, and there are lots, and they kind of do like feel like friends in a way. And not to mention, I love it if they have a dog. I bet you do
Yeah,
too. Although I
me
do have
too.
to
Yeah,
tell,
I love the dogs.
I do have to ask every time. Do you have a cat? I'm allergic to cats. I have lost so many I've reserved and then canceled so many bookings because of that. Just because they have a cat.
Yeah, it's not, they don't say. I had someone in Florida, I think it was, that had a cat, and I'm allergic to cats as well. And I didn't know they had a cat until I got there. I didn't think to ask ahead of time. And when I got there, the cat was not allowed in the bedroom. So the room was spotless and I never had a problem. But I told them when I was leaving, it was two young girls. And I said, listen, you really need to put it on there that you have a cat, because I'm fine with that. But if I was staying here for a week, I probably would have had a problem.
Well, Airbnb also doesn't have any way to indicate to screen for that, and I don't know why. The only thing whether or not they screen for is whether or not pets are acceptable, and that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And you
So
know,
I
Susan,
mean, most of the people here would have a picture of their dog.
yeah. And I finally got to say the biggest difference for me, Susan, without a doubt, is the internet access in hotels, no matter what hotel you go to, is horrendous. I go to Airbnbs and I usually have great internet access. I was in an Embassy Suites trying to download a video file, and I tried it 4 or 5 times. And after about 90 minutes, it would quit every time. Then I went into an Airbnb after that, and I downloaded the video file in 5 minutes. I mean, that is, and they're more
Yeah.
secure. That is the biggest reason of all, I think, to stay with Airbnbs is you will have a good internet connection, which you will not have with a hotel.
Not necessarily in rural Ireland. Some people don't have internet in rural Ireland. I was
I can
driving to a
imagine that.
place the other day, 2 hours, and I had the earbud in and I had the map, Google Maps. I sort of knew where I was going. I'd been there before, but just had the map in case I missed a turn or whatever. And a couple times, 3 times in the 2 hours it took me to get there, it dropped and said, "Oh, lost GPS connection, no internet." So I was like, but it came right back. But yeah, I know what you mean. When you want the internet, you definitely need it.
Yeah, I can imagine that. A lot of Airbnbs have self-serve laundry, and then some of them will help with my laundry, but I don't need help. But I just like having, I can go to a washing machine, put my clothes in, get it done.
Yeah, I stayed at an Airbnb in Dublin City. A friend of mine from university was coming over with his wife and 3 or 4 of his kids. So they rented an entire apartment. And it was just, it was fabulous. I mean, beautifully done, great laundry. And like on one of the floors, you just went up like 5 steps. There was a whole floor that was just the laundry. You go up to the other bedrooms. I mean, they had fold out sofas because I wasn't expecting, and they said, stay. So I stayed next, one night. And the whole time I was in there, though, I did look around and say, God, this is an apartment that somebody could be renting. So I can see why places that have housing shortages have a problem. But
Well,
another
then,
tip I have, a tip for somebody that's thinking of doing it. There's something on Netflix called Stay Here. It's probably 5 years old at this point, maybe even a little bit longer. But they go to, I don't know, maybe about 7 or 8 Airbnbs. One is in Austin, Texas, down in South Congress, where I used to live. And they go in and kind of critique someone's Airbnb and make it better. And it's a fabulous show with great ideas. Like one guy, he had kind of instant coffee or something. That's all he had because you rented the whole place and he was not there. And they said, some of the people that are coming here are coming from Asia, flying into Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., and they're coming, they literally have been on a plane for 20 hours and they're not stopping at a store on the way. so you need to have something to welcome them. And so things like that. Like I have a little goodie basket that has local chocolate, local beer, a couple things like that. And, people say, oh, it's expensive. You know what? Not even half the people take the beer, but it's there. And so they see that as a perception of, oh, look what she has. She has beer and chocolate and all this stuff. They all take the chocolate, but a lot of times they don't take the beer. So, I just think that it's the Stay Here on Netflix it's got some really good tips.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed, at least going outside of America, there's still a lot of buildings and houses or apartments where you have to use a key to unlock the door to go out. It's not like that in America at all. And you've certainly
And
noticed
some of
that
them,
too.
it's like you go down the stairs, you go down a hall, go down another stair, go down a hall, go down one guy. I stayed in London last month, and the Airbnb, he literally said, I'm meeting you and walking you to the apartment, and I will walk you the next morning. And because it was like 5 staircases, they weren't big, but it was like you went down a hall, 4 steps, went there, and I just like, oh my God. But the next day I did get lost. I said, oh, I can find my way out. Don't worry about it. You don't have to get up. And then of course I couldn't find it, but there was somebody cleaning the floors. So that guy gave me directions. But yeah, the European apartments and stuff are just so completely different.
And that's something I would definitely stress. Make sure your Airbnb is easy to find. I mean, depending on, especially, and sometimes I will go to one at night. I remember there was one in South Carolina that had a blue reflective sign out by the street with a number on it. I don't know what it is about Texas, but Texas house numbers, they don't like to make their house numbers visible in Texas, but I go to other places that are real easy to see, and because you don't want to risk knocking on the wrong door at night.
That's so true. So true.
Yeah. What are some of the mistakes you think that Airbnb hosts make?
Well, I tell you one mistake, and it's just simple things to start with. And of course, depends on how much money you're charging, what you want to put into the room. But I went out to a store. It was a discount store. It wasn't anything crazy expensive. And I bought wooden hangers. So in my closet for my Airbnb room, it is just Airbnb. There's 2 robes and hangers for them. And they're nice wooden hangers. I go into some Airbnbs and it looks like every time they came back from Target, they just threw the plastic hanger into the closet. So when you open the closet, even though it's empty and ready to be used, it's like all these hangers, they're all mixed up and they don't match and they just look all jumbled. And when you pull one out, 6 come out at the same time. And I'll tell you, I was just like, really? Seriously, I think my 6 hangers probably cost $6. The little things like that. Another mistake a lot of people have is they don't, especially for me, where I get foreign visitors, they don't understand that, like, Americans are walking around Killarney, which is a big tourist town, about an hour and a half away from here. They're walking around looking for dinner at 9:30 at night. Well, you know what? There's not many places that are serving dinner at 9:30 at night because the sun is high up in the sky. It doesn't set until 10:30 in the summertime at night. And the Americans don't realize it's 10:30 at night. And once the sun starts to go down, they're like, oh, it's time for dinner. And everything's closed. So that's one thing that a lot of, I think a little indication, I give them all that information before they even book. Some people have a book, that's at the room. It tells them all the information. No way, man. I tell them when they're coming. If you're going to come after 8 o'clock at night, you need to eat on the way. Because if you get here at 8, by the time you settle in and take showers, you will not get dinner in this village. So I think that's one thing a lot of the hosts make mistakes. The more information you give the person, the happier they are.
That's true. Yes. And I know some guests will even have like a form letter. What do you think about, I've noticed, I have to admit too, I will look at a place and just not go there because of the cancellation policies. I mean, I would much rather pay more and have a place where I can maybe cancel 5 days before the rental, before I'm scheduled to show up, if something happens. Because, like, some of these places, it's only free cancellation within 48 hours. And that can be, I can be booking this 3 months ahead. What do you make about, the differences in cancellation policies?
Well, I think the problem with that is Airbnb. I think Airbnb's choices of cancellation problems for a host aren't enough, because the way they have it, like you said, you can either cancel 48 hours after you make the reservation, which might be 4 months in advance, or it's, a week out or whatever. And to be honest, I would rather have, say, 3 days. Like, if 3 days beforehand, that'll give me enough time to someone else will look at my listing and book it. But when somebody cancels on me 48 hours beforehand, that's 1 day, really. 48 hours is 1 day, because they canceled Wednesday night. The person who's looking for the room will book it on Thursday for Friday. So that's really only 1 day. And so I lose money. So I don't want the 2 day. But I have actually, for a while they had like a week or something, and I did that. Now, only 2 people have ever canceled on me. Both of them, I gave their money back. I actually PayPal'd their money back. Didn't even deal with Airbnb. One of them, they had a bicycle problem and they were cycling here. And so, I mean, I just said, listen, I could have used a night off anyway. And I just gave them their money back, except for the fee or whatever that I had to pay. But yeah, the cancellation policy is,
Well, what I mean, sometimes I may be booking.
I had somebody today asking me questions in May. Yeah,
Well,
I have somebody that's coming in May. They've already asked me 4 questions today.
Yeah. Well, another thing too, Susan, I often do ask questions also as a test, because I want to see how responsive this host is. I had a host back where I grew up, and I was going to book with them, and then I needed to make a change. I wanted to shift I was having like 6 days, and I just wanted to check in on Wednesday instead of Tuesday, and then I wanted to check out a day later as well. So it'd be the same money, but I sent in the request for a change. And it sat there for weeks where they did not respond to the change. And you have some of these hosts that just are not responsive at all. And I eventually just canceled it, because I said, if I have a problem, this host isn't going to answer. And I would say those people probably don't last very long.
Well, I had one where I canceled. I went to a wedding, and in Pennsylvania, I think. And I had it all booked and, months in advance, because I was going, bought tickets from Europe. So I had the thing all booked up. And about a week or so, now I told her, I'm going to a wedding. Here's where the wedding is. This is the day of the wedding. This is rehearsal dinner. This is when I think about it. Never did she say, I'm not close to that venue. And she said she was close to, I don't remember, Gettysburg National Park or something. But she really wasn't close to Gettysburg National Park. I mean, it would have been like a 35-minute, 40-minute drive after the wedding to go home in the dark. And I just was like, well, you're not really that close to Gettysburg National Park. And she never even really said that. And there's another place with the same name as hers, because it was a real B&B. There was another B&B with a similar name. So I wasn't even looking at the right place on the map when I booked. And she should have said, like, oh, yeah, just so you know, I'm really 18 miles away from that wedding, and there's another place with the same name. She never said that. So I ended up canceling and never got my money back.
Well, one thing that also happens too, Susan, is sometimes I will always ask people how far or how close is something. And I said, I want a number with units. I mean, either number of miles or number of minutes. Don't just say, oh, it's really far away or it's not far away. I mean, that's baloney. It doesn't mean anything, And
yeah. Also, the type of food that's nearby.
Yeah.
I stayed in a little town, not town, probably a village in Ireland, and I was on the way to Shannon Airport to pick someone up, and I was just gonna, because Shannon Airport's about 3.5 hours away. So I said, well, I'll go and spend the night beforehand. And I got there and I said, is there any place to eat? She says, oh, there's 4 places nearby. So I got to the place and said, okay, where is it? They were fast food restaurants. Well, that's not a meal to me. I'm not a real fast food eater. So I actually had to get in the car and drive to another town to get something to eat. And I felt like, you need to say there's no restaurants in this town.
Yeah, and if you're an Airbnb host, you gotta realize maybe your maybe your guests have a car, maybe they don't. And if they don't have a car, that's going to impact what they do.
Yeah.
Sometimes what I'll do, like if I'm going,
but I tell you, I love it though. I mean,
yeah.
And there's problems with it, but I still love it. I have a friend in Germany. If I called her this week and said, I think I might buy a Ryanair ticket for 40 euros and go to Germany, she'd say, come stay with us. I definitely have made friends like that just from hosting them on Airbnb.
Yeah. What are you, since you're also a very frequent guest, what should you look for as a guest? I know I have my opinions.
Well, interestingly, I look at the photographs. I'm pretty critical of the photos. I do photography for Airbnbs, and so that's just something I kind of do on the side. But because I'm a good photographer, and it's not expensive, I basically charge what they would charge for one night, and I say, that's it. So I'm not going to charge you like 300 euros or something like that to come in and take pictures. And I walk in there and some of the pictures, the bed's not made, it's made, but it's not made. And if you can't make it look good in the picture, then you're not going to make it look good when someone's coming, And so I think that sort of thing, I'm really critical of the pictures. I'm really critical of, kind of their tone. And like you said, that thing about how long does it take for them to reply, that's really crucial.
Sometimes I've had pictures of where it was just completely wrong. One thing for me, Susan, I want a desk. It doesn't have to be a big fancy desk, but I want a desk so I sit down, maybe record a podcast, get stuff done. And if you have a picture, and I had a picture of a room with a desk, and then I show up, and the room is two sets of bunk beds. I mean, literally, 4 beds all together. I'm a single person. It's like, I don't need this. This is not what you showed me on the pictures. Now, if it's not and I will make that comment. I will say I've had a few hosts where the pictures were totally wrong, but everything was fine. But then, like this one, I said, no way. I mean, I wanted a desk. I have no desk. And some people actually will.
Well, that's one of the new questions. There's new questions now when you critique a room. And I swear I don't think this question was there before. But the question, when I critiqued the room in London last month, it said, were the pictures representative of the space? And I don't remember that being there before. And that was one of the questions. So I said, yeah, because it was. But yours, you definitely would say no, because they're not. Even though it was nice,
yeah,
pictures are not representative of the space.
One of the problems also, Susan, is, and granted, I don't think this much about going abroad, but you can put an Airbnb in anywhere. And some of these Airbnbs, I went to Memphis once, and I knew somebody who lived in Memphis, and I basically I sent her a list of these Airbnbs, and she said, no, don't go to that neighborhood. Don't go to that neighborhood. And there's no way to screen out the bad neighborhoods on Airbnb. I was in a place in Jacksonville, and there's a place right next door, condemned house. And then I went around and really, I drove by some of the schools, and the schools had these fences around them that were that they built the schools like a fortress. And I just thought, this isn't a good sign. And unfortunately, Susan, this is the sad part. I don't really trust reviews that much. I mean, the place in Jacksonville had a 4.97 rating, and nobody said a word. And there were like 30 reviews. Nobody said a word about the neighborhood. Not to mention, there were also, this was the only time this has happened, plumbing issues.
Yikes.
Literally, yeah, that's never good. And it's like, and I basically gotten to the point, do people have these bad experiences, but then they don't put them on the reviews? I'm really wondering about this.
I think they do. I think you're exactly right, because I have a friend who had a terrible experience with her renters, with the Airbnb guests. And I said, you have to be really clear about how bad it was. And she said, "Oh no, I'm not reviewing them." And I said, "What do you mean you're not reviewing them?" She goes, "They know where I live. If I give them a bad review, they might come after me." And so she does not put bad reviews on. And I thought, well, God, that's not what, you need to put a bad review on, or we'll never know for the next person. But I think you're right. I think people are not. Like, if I see somebody that has a room that they've been on Airbnb for 5 or 6 years, and they only have like 15 people staying, like 15 people reviews, I'm suspicious, because I'm thinking people aren't reviewing it. Because if they've had a room for 6 years, there's got to be more than 15 people.
I think so. I think some Airbnb hosts just don't bother reviewing at all. Usually the reviews. I will admit, I usually write long reviews. I try to tell people, like, you'll need a car here, you don't need a car here, that kind of thing. I want to be helpful. I wish Airbnb had a way to, rate reviews, but they don't. But I always try to. And sometimes also, I will admit too, I had one very bad review written about me, and fortunately I had a way out of it, and I called, well, Airbnb will remove bad reviews, because this was the only host that was absolutely positively horrible.
And so they removed your review that you gave.
Airbnb removed the review I gave her, and Airbnb removed the review I gave her, and Airbnb removed the review she gave me. It was there were a lot of red flags.
I didn't know that they did.
Yeah, there were a lot of red flags. I will, this was somebody, who was it's like, I do try to keep things clean, and it's like, like there's a little speck of dust. It's like, oh geez, come on. And then of course I said, yeah, and you've got a lock on the cabinets under the bathroom sink, so I can't get to the cleaning supplies. It's really
well. Interestingly, I had someone book me for 4 nights, a husband and wife, and they'd been on Airbnb for 10 years. They had 10 years of fabulous reviews, but the previous 2 reviews when they booked me were horrible, absolutely horrible. And so one of the ladies, I actually was able to look her up and sent her a message through Instagram or something.
Yes.
And said, hey, I found you because you reviewed at your name and blah, blah, blah. And this guy and his wife are coming to stay with me, and I'm really apprehensive now that I see your review. And she went on about how terrible they were, and he yelled and this, that, and the other thing. And I just thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? But I didn't want to cancel, because I just, it was just, you get such bad luck if you cancel. And so I just said, okay, well, I can put up with it for 4 days or whatever. And I'll tell you, they were the nicest guests. He definitely had a hearing problem. He raised his voice constantly. And I know from being around other people who are deaf, this guy has a hearing problem. That's why he was yelling. He wasn't yelling at you. He was just loud everywhere he went. And she just complained about this. Oh, he couldn't take a shower because there's limit to how. Let me tell you something. If somebody wants to take a shower at 2 a.m., they could take a shower at 2 a.m. But this woman had like no shower after 10 or whatever. And she had all these rules. And I said, okay. So I wrote him a great review. And I just said, I want to address a previous review because he was, loud, because I think he might have a hearing problem. I said he was a little hard to deal with because I think he might be a little autistic, but it was wonderful. I mean, great guests. Went and had dinner with them. I met them went out, they were walking, and I met him in another town that they stayed in. And, because I said, hey, I like that town you're going to, you want to get together for dinner. And so I just, so I'll tell you, there's definitely some of the reviews, some of the hosts are bad, and they're not as bad as I think some people are too picky.
I wish there was a way
I
to
look at Airbnb like public bus. You never know who you're going to get on the public bus, and you never know who you're going to get on Airbnb.
I wish there was a way to go back and look at all the reviews a host has posted, because I'd like to see, does this host always post negative reviews, stuff like that,
Yeah, kind of like TripAdvisor. If you see people on TripAdvisor, you can actually click on their name and see all the reviews that they've left. So you can see, are these people just bitchy and moany people?
I had somebody turn me down just because they said, well, you just left a negative review for somebody else. I don't know. Can hosts see the reviews that guests leave?
Gosh, I didn't think so, but maybe it's just something I've never really looked for. That's interesting. Didn't know that was possible.
I very rarely get turned down, and sometimes it's just, oh, well, I got somebody staying here. I'm like, well, block it off then, and then I go back a day later and it's still not blocked off. What do you think about, these, what I call corporate or investor Airbnbs? I generally try to avoid them. I mean, if I see a host who has like 10 units, it's like, no, I don't want to stay with this person.
Same with me. And then also I'll look at some where it's actually a B&B who are also listed on Airbnb. And if I get a feeling that it might not be someone's house, that it's actually a professional B&B, I then go offline and try and find it on, B&B Ireland, or look it up on Google Maps or something, because I'd rather just give the person all the money, rather than Airbnb get their cut, if it's a real B&B. So sometimes
there are even hotels on Airbnb now, which I don't really appreciate, because this is not what I'm looking for. If I was looking for a hotel, I'd go for a hotel. That's
exactly right. They have that new category. I don't like it either.
Have you done anything with any of the competitors of Airbnb, or because I guess VRBO is the only one who comes close, and they're still not quite the same. Airbnb really does
have the whole house.
Yeah.
Well, the way it works here, it's kind of interesting. And also, I'll be honest, I do a lot more searching now when I travel, because you can get a lot of information from looking at someone's listing, and you can sometimes find them on Facebook, or here we have something that's like Craigslist, but it's called Done Deal. So a lot of people list their holiday homes and stuff like that on Done Deal. So sometimes you can go to other platforms and things. And now you can actually list your Airbnb on Google Maps. And so, people who rent holiday homes in my village, they're on Google Maps. Now, I'm not going to do that because there's just one bedroom. But if I wanted to rent my whole house for a week, I could put it on Google Maps.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know you could do that, but yeah, Google Maps is certainly, Google Maps can be helpful, but sometimes people forget that stuff. Yeah, what's a general way to, and do you get any suggestions from people, and how do you respond to those? I mean, sometimes I will make a suggestion to somebody, just about this as a way to do something, like, for example, I told one person, I said, you should have a rule, this was, two Airbnbs in the house, two people sharing a bathroom. And I said, you need to have a rule that says, when you leave the bathroom, you leave the door open, so the next person can see that the bathroom is available.
Knows it's empty.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I did mention that to one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've only stayed in one place where that was the issue, and I just had to go to the bathroom, and I was like, is someone in there? Is someone not in there? Especially the ones where the fan runs for like 10 minutes after they leave. Sometimes you turn the fan off, but it still runs for 10 more minutes, and it's like, oh. But but yeah, that is a good idea. I don't think I've ever gotten suggestions. Well, I did get one suggestion because one person, I mean, in 5 years, 7 years, one person has gone to the wrong house. And so now, even though only one person has gone to the wrong house, when I do my final Airbnb message, I include a photograph of my house. Because I had somebody, I mean, after 5 years, somebody calls and says, we're in the house and we don't see you. And I'm like, what do you mean you're in the house and I don't see you? I'm in the house. What do you mean? And they said, and then they sent me a picture of this house. And I'm like, that's not my house. I have no idea where you are. I don't even recognize it. And then they blamed me and critiqued me for bad directions. So luckily we can reply on Airbnb. And so my reply was, I'm sorry that after 175 visitors, you are the first person that has ever gone to the wrong place. Because no one else ever has. You know, that's like, he says I didn't give him good directions. I gave him the air code. You know, the air code in Ireland, every building has its own air code, every building. So he knew the air code. He just didn't know how to, he didn't know how to look at a map.
Yeah, sometimes people have those issues.
But I did have one lady. Oh, it killed me. One lady, she was the first time she ever used Airbnb. She stayed with me. And her review was, the breakfast was underwhelming. And all I could think of, it took me a long time to get over that. And finally I decided she meant overwhelming. Because if she thought my breakfast was underwhelming, she was going to be in for a rude awakening in Airbnb. Because I do local brown bread, smoked salmon, eggs, granola, muesli, 3 kinds of cereal, fruit. That is not an underwhelming breakfast.
Yeah, I get it. I don't really ask for food, although sometimes they offer me food, but that's about it.
Review I've ever got.
I will say sometimes I did make a suggestion to one host. I say I always look for a desk, and I went into the room and there was like, it wasn't a desk, but it was a table. So I guess so this works. But then I go around and realize you have no electrical outlets by this table. So I literally picked up the table and moved it to another part of the room. And then when I checked out, I moved it back to where it was. And I said to her, you might consider the fact that you have the table, but there's no electricity by it. So I don't know if maybe traveling with an extension cord would help too. But I could use the laptop, but I couldn't plug it in. So yeah.
Well, my feeling is they should have the extension cord.
Or they should have an outlet by the desk. Yeah. I've been in a hotel like that too. There was a little desk, but there was no outlet there. Yeah. And sometimes you just end up with some really weird.
Well, I have a little drawer that has extra chargers. I have, I have extra toothbrushes. I have all kinds of stuff in a little drawer. And like somebody actually left their charger here last week, and they had stayed a few days, and so she said, I left my charger, it's in the wall. And I said, sure enough, there it is. And she said, I can FedEx you, or I'm not FedEx, she said, I can Revolut you the money, or PayPal or whatever. And I just said, listen, you don't have to pay me. She already paid me $190 for the days that she was here. I'm not going to charge her, and it cost me €4 to ship her the stuff. But yeah, but there's some people that are actually like professional hotel critiquers and stuff. They intentionally leave in the room to see how the hotel reacts to something being left behind.
Yeah, I believe that, and sometimes, you'll have an Airbnb where they will give you, different kinds of plugs, or give you an adapter for all the different plugs. I had an Airbnb in Kuala Lumpur, which is actually pretty cheap. This was less than $50 a night. But if this had been in downtown Manhattan, it would have probably been $400. And they literally just rented out a bunch of rooms in what looked like an apartment building, turned it into Airbnbs. But I was like, wow, this is, and they had laundry. I could go do my laundry and stuff like that.
you get a lot of weird. Occasionally you find a place that's weird. Like one time I was in an Airbnb. All the bedrooms were on one floor. All the bathrooms were on another floor, which is and there were two. There were
Sounds like a
two bathrooms
hostel.
downstairs. Yeah, as I said, and I did mention that. Said this is, but also mention sometimes they'll like the one place that I gave a fairly bad review on. I did mention this is one of the few places where he actually gives you a laundry basket. There's one in the room if you need to do your laundry, and whether or not the beds are comfortable. I stayed with one host that wasn't very experienced, and I said, I checked in, the place was clean, nice guy, but said, yeah, but there was the ceiling fan that we couldn't get turned off in the room. And I'm just like, why can't we? And I actually ended up,
God, I'd hate that.
I actually left that place a day early because of that. But, it's like, and I said, he needs to, that's why I generally don't like to stay with hosts who have less than 10 stays. They're still kind of getting the hang of it. They haven't learned how to put up good pictures. They haven't always learned how to put up good pictures, or just, learned all the things that you need to do when you're a host.
Because I'm a photographer, that is one of my pet peeves. Like that picture is really big that's above my fireplace, but it wasn't outrageously expensive. And I had it printed at a discount place just to see the quality of the picture. And you go into these Airbnbs and they have this big wall and there's a photograph that's about this big. And it drives me crazy. And it's like, come on, there's local artists where you live. There's local photographers, just get something a little bigger so it's on the wall. It's like, it just kills me.
That doesn't really mean a lot to me, And another thing too is, sometimes, I had one place where I was just really couldn't get the room dark. You want to go to bed, but I do wear, these little eye covers. So, but yeah, there's always little things. Some places you lock the room, some places you don't. Do you ever have any issues of guests with guests or anything like that? Or you only have one place though?
No. Yeah, only one room. But I'll tell you, I've had people where they're like a husband and wife are staying here because their daughter, son-in-law, and the kids are renting a house down the street. And I tell them right away, I say, listen, if the kids want to come up here and see you here, they can come in. It's like,
yeah.
I just think all these people that have rules, there's too many rules in a lot of these rooms.
Well, I think also, if you have you don't necessarily want a bunch of people coming into the place. I know some people who had a big house and it would keep getting rented out for parties. And of course, everybody in the neighborhood hated that. Something else too, though. Something else too, though. And I don't know what happens. Sometimes I can confess one time, being a guy, I was traveling and, staying at an Airbnb for a few days. And then I know, there's a traveling nurse in there. So I said, well, gee, I wonder if she'd like to, mess around. But I didn't do anything though. But, I suppose that happens though now and then. But, but that's also something else.
But I'll tell you, that would bug me just, as a host, only because I'd always question, like, are both parties really saying yes? But you never know. If they met in a bar, it's a whole nother story. But I do hear that people say that, they brought back someone that night and they were drunk and all this kind of stuff.
No,
I hear stories about like some of my friends are the cleaners, and some of them they have parties, but they're not really a party. Because like if you had a party, you plan it. We're talking, they go to the pub, they bring 7 people back to the house that they don't even know, 5 hours before. And I tell you, man, I've heard stories about cleaning issues that.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean, for example, meeting somebody at a bar, but, for example, like I was staying in one room and there was a nice young lady across the hall who was also staying there. I said, well, geez, she's right there, and it does say the guest, the host says you can't bring visitors in your door. The host, you can't bring visitors in the room. I said, yeah, but technically speaking, she's not a visitor. She's approved. She's just coming into my room, She's
not a visitor.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's probably different with apartments, because you obviously don't want a situation where you have a house that might be fairly small and you got 10 people in it. I mean, and also one host also responded suggestively. I said, you get a lot of Airbnb hosts that, don't want you to wear your shoes in the house. And I say politely, if you don't want us to wear shoes in the house, that's fine, but please put a chair by the door. So I can sit down and put on my shoes, sit down, take off my shoes. It's just makes it a little easier. And they said, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, good
And,
idea.
yeah. And, sometimes
Yeah,
you
I
have
had
to,
one Airbnb. I walked their dog because I said the next morning, I said, I'm a morning person. Can I walk the dog in the morning? And she's like, sure, like if you want to. And I walked the dog and walked and I had a nice long walk and saw the canal near where they are and all this other kind of
yeah,
stuff. I loved it.
like there was that one lady. I never saw the lady, but I told her, she said, well, you had a nice place. I said, and then I said, I'll come back and see if I can meet the Three Stooges again. And I was referring to her dogs. Yeah. Yeah, because it isn't always nice. It is nice when you at least meet the host, but sometimes, I don't know. I know one couple, actually paid for their travel by putting their, they would pay for their travel by putting their house on Airbnb when they were out, and they would put their car on Turo, and they actually made money off that. All their traveling got paid for that way. It was,
I never heard of Turo until I was in Miami last April. My friend was staying in Florida and she was using a Turo car. And I just thought it was a beautiful BMW SUV. And I was like, wow.
yes, if people out there don't know, Turo, Turo, is basically Airbnb for cars. It's kind of a roll of the dice, but
Yep.
the first time I rented on Turo, I actually got a Prius, which is something they've kind of caught up with rental cars. Unfortunately, they're not that much better deal, and usually you have a mileage limit on them, like 200 a day. But yeah, I don't know how that all works out, but it's kind of a and I don't
I
know.
don't think they have it over here.
Do you have any insurance issues with Airbnb? Like, does your insurance company not like you hosting with Airbnb, or what do they say about that? Or do you have to pay more for insurance, or how does that work?
You do. You have to pay more for your insurance. I specifically don't have any extra insurance because I pay for insurance on Airbnb. So my feeling is, why should I pay my homeowners to have Airbnb insurance when I actually have, because part of the fee that goes to Airbnb is insurance.
Yeah.
So if anything ever happened, let me tell you something. Airbnb is who I'm going after, not my homeowner's policy.
Well, you have that case, for example, heaven forbid the person's smoking in bed and then they fall asleep or something like that. Or just, I think almost all Airbnbs out there are non-smoking though. It's like, yeah, or something like that. It's just, and some of them, and there's different policies. I don't know. Maybe you have that case, where somebody, I will admit I had a chair break on me and they wanted me to pay for it. So I did, that was another strange place.
I had somebody broke something here. What did they break? Somebody broke something here and they just paid. They just said, hey, listen, we broke this.
Yeah.
And send us a bill and let us know how much it was. And I did, and they paid and never complained or anything.
I did stay in one place also that was just like literally beds in a big room. So that was in Dallas. I said, I don't think I'm going to stay like this again. But I remember I left my shirt there and the host actually did send it. So they got a really nice review after they mailed my.
So was it like a hostel?
It wasn't really a hostel.
Set up like a hostel when you say a lot of rooms.
It was set up like a hostel, but I was still fairly new with Airbnb. I mean, I usually get my own room. I don't necessarily have to have my own bathroom, but I guess it's nicer to have one. But all depends on. It doesn't. I have to admit, also, I was in Seoul and Tokyo, and you want to talk about some really small Airbnbs. There was one that did not have a chair at all. The only chair was the bed. Yeah, it was so.
Whoa.
I never really considered that, these are places that aren't cheap to go, but yeah, I don't know what I'll do if I go back there, but then some places you find
Well,
a
that's
place to
it. Some of those expensive cities and stuff, you just want to get something cheap. My feeling, because I'm
yeah,
not like sometimes people are really shocked that, like I'll stay in hostels. When I was in London, I stayed at a friend's house for most of the time, but one night before I flew out, I stayed in a hostel. And people were like, "What do you mean you're staying in a hostel?" And it's like, you know what? I come in at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and I wake up and leave at 6 a.m. I'd rather put my money in food. I'll pay 125 euros for a really good dinner, but I don't want to spend 200 euros on a hotel.
there aren't that many hotels that are worth it. I mean, I used to be a hotel receptionist. And you deal with a lot of different things there, but most of those really expensive hotels aren't really. I mean, it's all just about what you can get people to pay for it. Did you ever try to, make any money on special events, Susan? I mean, I know a guy who did. He was only hosting for a while, but he was in Phoenix, and he said, "Oh, I can't wait for the Super Bowl to get here," because of course he raised his rates to high heaven.
Well, I don't raise my rate, but what I do is I make it so I have a 2-night minimum. So when there's an event here, I have a 2-night minimum, because there'll be people that are here for like a running festival or a triathlon or, there's a festival, an Irish festival coming up. I have it set for 2-night minimum because I don't want, somebody that just books one night and it's a 3-day weekend. It's Monday's a holiday. So I do
Yeah.
change that, but I don't change the price.
I also
But I
find
could
that
see why somebody would be tempted with Super Bowl. I'd probably raise my price.
yeah, and I don't think you don't really save that much with Airbnb by going just for a single night. I mean, I very rarely. I mean, I've had a few stays on Airbnb that were single nights, but they're not very often. And like sometimes, like if I'm just on a road trip, I mean, I drove back to see my family a few years ago, and I just got in the car in Austin. And I just said, okay, let's see how far we go. I didn't reserve anything, and we'll just wing it. Uh, Hotels have gotten so expensive, though. I don't know what it is, and the quality just is not that great sometimes. You can't hardly find a hotel for under $50 anywhere, anytime, even in the dead of winter.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I don't think I've seen anything under, I'd say 70 seems to be the cheapest for like the really teeny motel kind of thing
and I know from
on the highway.
experience, I know from experience how dead the hotel business gets in the winter. It really does. It's almost like they're working together.
You got to join, AARP. Get the AARP discount, Chris.
None of those discounts are that great, though. Anyway, they're usually 10% or something like that. They're not.
It's better than nothing.
Would you
Or
say
as
you
they
get?
say, better than a sharp stick in the eye.
Well, I don't know if there's anything left to cover here. I think we've kind of covered everything. Is there?
Well, I will say
You don't
this.
ask.
In addition to Airbnb, I actually do couch surfing still.
Yeah.
So sometimes I have people staying here and they're not paying me anything. But I love couch surfing. I have had great experiences couch surfing, and I really love couch surfing. So I still host about 4 or 5 times a year. I'll host somebody on couch surfing for free.
I have to admit, I think Airbnb has probably, to a certain extent, destroyed couch surfing. I mean, the last time I've been in situations where I don't really have the opportunity to host, so if I don't host, I'm not going to use it. But when I was traveling to Europe, and I would look for all these places, and I would have to send messages to 30 or 40 hosts before I'd get a response, because you'd have these inactive hosts, and there was no way to tell if they were inactive. I mean, I book with Airbnb, I get a response within an hour.
Yeah, couch surfing has changed, and they now have a fee to use it, even if you only host. And like, I know somebody that lives not far from here, just not in Mortarville, but in another town. And she's hosted for years. And she said, I'm not paying. She said, I don't feel the host should pay. I have people stay with me. They stay with me free. They've loved it. They've been doing it for 20 years. And she said, I think they've made a big mistake. I'm not paying to host people for free. And I think that's the problem, that the profile is still there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And you message them, you don't get a response. And then, of course, I'll get back this other response from somebody who was an active host, but it's like, you just sent me a form letter. He was mad because, I basically sent out a form letter, because I had to send the same message to 40 different hosts to find a host that was responsive. And even ended up blocking me. It's like, oh, forget this.
Well,
so I just end up going to Airbnb.
I had somebody that sent me a form letter this week. He even had brackets. Like he started off by saying, like, kind of like some of the things about the profile, about this picture, that picture. And then in parentheses, the little bracket, it said, ask about common interests. And then the next thing, tell them that and I was like, this is a form letter. He started off with 2 sentences that were personal, and then the rest of it was a form.
Hey, I agree. Form letters aren't nice.
And then denied it.
Form letters aren't nice, but sometimes, in a situation like that where you have to message a bunch of people, cutting and pasting is the only way to go. You have these.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, also, I'm now encountering also that there are a lot of, as I call them, lifestyle couch surfers. People who just freeload off the system. It's, I think I still pay. I
always tell people it's not a free place to stay. It's a place where you stay with like-minded travelers. And if you're looking for a free place to stay, this is not for you.
And, I kind of find hosting to be a hassle anyway. I'd rather just pay the money and not have to host.
Yeah, I had a great girl this past summer, in the fall, and she was here with her dog. So she said she had a camper van, and she said, I'm not going to, sleep in the room or anything because I've got the dog and the room is too clean. And oh my gosh, look at all the white sheets and everything's white. And so she said, I'll sleep in the camper van, but she used the shower and had a bathroom and all that kind of stuff, and she was a couch surfer. And I had a great time. She was here for about 4 days, and we had Prosecco from, gosh, she was from like Croatia or Serbia or something. And we had Prosecco down on the promenade watching the sunset. And I mean, we just had the best time. I really had a great time.
Well, it's been great having you. You certainly are a great host. I mean, you really get to know your people, and I think that's great. I don't know if there's a profile, but sometimes I think the best Airbnb hosts are, maybe an older person or an older couple, empty nesters. Their kids are out of the house, but they still got these rooms. But, there's something else too, this Susan. I remember, and this was back in 2023, the Airbnbs were more expensive in Memphis than they were in Phoenix. And I had a theory about this. There were more people in Phoenix, their property taxes and expenses were going so high that they were basically doing Airbnb to be able to make their house payments. But in a place like Memphis, which is still cheap, they didn't have to. I don't know. I don't know how well that holds true or not, but yeah.
I don't know how it works in America. Do they, can you actually do Airbnb in America and sort of hide it from the federal government? Can you not pay tax on it?
I don't know how you would. Doesn't Airbnb, wouldn't Airbnb send you the tax paperwork?
Well, they'd send it to me, but that doesn't mean I'd have to actually put it on my taxes. But here in Ireland, they send the Airbnb to the revenue. So revenue knows.
I don't think you'd be able to get away with Airbnb and not pay taxes. The only way you'd be able to do that is if you're renting out a place and we're just only taking cash for rent. Airbnb is all on credit cards, so yeah, I don't know how they work, but I don't see how you could hide your Airbnb income from the IRS. This is not financial advice. This is not tax advice. This is not legal advice.
People did not. Yeah. When it was first here in Ireland, there were plenty of people that weren't paying tax. And so the federal government made a deal with Airbnb and said, for you to stay, we want you to send us the revenue information. So that's since I've moved here, that started. So before I moved here, I know for sure people weren't not always paying their taxes.
I will say also, I've had a couple people, unfortunately, who claimed to speak English and then didn't, and they were using the translation app. I don't know, or they claimed to speak English, but their English wasn't that good. They were still. It really does depend, but there were some nice ladies, and goodness knows too. You also find that there's just some really interesting architecture out there. Another thing also too is I've
Yeah,
noticed.
just interesting idea. I mean, like, there's decorations. You just different art. I mean, there's really,
Yeah.
every houses are interesting.
And sometimes, you'll have good soundproofing or you might not have good soundproofing. That's something else to be aware of. Because sometimes I can't really do anything later in the evening because if I have the computer on watching a video, somebody next to me will hear it or something like that. Airbnb is kind of varied on that. So if you do host Airbnb, try to make sure your place is pretty good soundproofing. So I think
I would use earbuds.
Yeah.
If I was listening to a video, I'd use earbuds, but I use it at my house when I'm listening because I just prefer it. So.
And then I will say, I've had Airbnb hosts that are very helpful though. It's just, like helping with laundry, helping me out when Turkish Airlines lost my luggage. The host in Yerevan, Armenia, who set me up with a driver who took me from Yerevan to Tbilisi, by the way, which was about 5 hours. I paid him for it, but it's nice to be set up with a driver and just, you'll run into a few less than satisfactory experiences, but I've got almost 100 stays, and the good ones make up for it. And you'll certainly.
I've had a couple bad experiences at hotels. I mean, nothing terrible, but so I always say, what, Airbnb might not be perfect, but the hotels aren't always perfect either.
I was in a hotel recently that just had absolutely horrible internet. Of course, the hotel internet is almost always bad. I mean, I never watched the TV. They could easily take the TV away, and I wouldn't care. But it's how did you get Irish citizenship? I should ask that.
Well, my grandparents were born here, and if your grandparents are Irish, you're guaranteed citizenship. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork. You have to get birth certificate from 1890 certified, and there's a lot of paperwork, but it was guaranteed. So I knew there was no question I'd get it.
Wow, how long was the process?
And I didn't have to sign. How like they go in and you basically go in and everybody says in America, they say the Pledge of Allegiance and they're all sworn in together. I didn't have to do that because of my status as a grandchild, I was considered Irish by foreign birth. So I didn't have to swear allegiance to Ireland because I was already Irish, according to the government.
Did you have to take your parents' birth certificates too, or, to prove the whole lineage?
I had to get my grandfather's birth certificate, my grandparents' marriage certificate, my grandfather's death certificate. He'd have been 114 if he was alive. My mother's birth certificate, my parents' marriage certificate, all of it. So you had to be able to trace it all the way down. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, sounds like you've adopted an Irish life, so it's
worth every penny. Yeah, it's getting pretty expensive over there, but yeah, it's a lovely country. And it's interesting, but if you go back in history,
it's expensive.
The Appalachian Mountains and the Scottish Highlands, those were actually all part of the same mountain range at one time before the continental drift. So I think that's why a lot of Scotch Irish ended up in Appalachia, because it was like where they live. And, the Scotch Irish were the real badasses of the American Revolution. Well, anyway.
Yeah, there's a great monument at Gettysburg to the Irish and the Scottish. The Irish one has this monstrous, statue. It's so big that on either side of the bottom of the statue is full-sized marble, like carved into the thing, Irish wolfhounds carved into it. So when you first see it, you're like, okay, what's the story with the two dogs? And so you go over. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, what's a place? What's a place in Ireland that is a kind of a secret that people should go see? It seemed like such a beautiful country.
Gosh, there's so many hidden things. My biggest tip to anybody that wants to come to Ireland is forget Dublin, Blarney Castle, Galway, Dingle, Ringakerry. Forget it. You're never going to be able to see everything you want to see unless you're here for like a year. So my tip is pick 2 counties and stay in those 2 counties. Forget the Cliffs of Moher. If you're not going to stay in Clare, don't worry about it. There's plenty of cliffs that are prettier than the Cliffs of Moher. So what you need to do is find 2 counties and really see interesting stuff that some of it you've never even heard of before.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
And they love Americans. I know that, so they probably love Americans as much as anybody. So,
yeah.
But so, yeah.
Because so many people here have family that live in America.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's been so much Irish immigration here.
Today in Ireland, look for my stuff, my photos. Today in Ireland on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.com, everything. Today in Ireland.
Yes.
Because it's a beautiful place. I try and post something pretty every day.
Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Check out my Substack, and people are giving me money, buy me a coffee. Thank you, Susan Baughman. I'm Chris Baker. We're out. Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.